She shoved her own mother-in-law into the mud in front of 200 wedding guests. But just 20 minutes later, the truth came out on a giant screen, and the bride who thought she had won was suddenly begging everyone to stop watching. Stay until the end, because this shocking family betrayal changes everything. I never imagined that the happiest day of my son's life would become the day I questioned whether I had truly known him at all. My name is Kaylin Voss. I am 61 years old, a retired structural engineer who spent 4 decades designing bridges across 3 states. My career taught me that even the strongest structure can collapse if one hidden support is removed. At the time, I believed that lesson applied only to concrete and steel. I was wrong. Families are built the same way, and sometimes they fall apart much faster. My wife, Elira, and I had been married for 37 years. We weren't wealthy enough to impress people with luxury, but we had built a peaceful life through patience, sacrifice, and trust. We raised one son, Rowan, who had always been respectful, thoughtful, and dependable. He wasn't the kind of child who caused trouble. He listened more than he spoke, and whenever he made a promise, he kept it. That was why I never worried when he introduced us to the woman he wanted to marry. Her name was Seraphine Kestrel. From the beginning, she carried herself with remarkable confidence. She dressed elegantly without appearing flashy, spoke carefully, and somehow always knew exactly what people wanted to hear. During our first dinner together, she complimented Elira's cooking, laughed at my old engineering stories, and even brought flowers without anyone asking. Looking back now, I realize every gesture felt almost rehearsed. At the time, however, I mistook calculation for kindness. About 8 months before the wedding, Elira underwent knee replacement surgery after years of chronic pain. Recovery was slow. She attended physical therapy twice each week, and although she had regained most of her strength, uneven ground still made walking difficult. Rowan knew this better than anyone because he often drove his mother to medical appointments whenever I couldn't. Seraphine knew it as well. She had accompanied us several times and even helped Elira climb the clinic stairs. That memory would haunt me later. The wedding was scheduled for early autumn at Silver Lake Estate, a beautiful vineyard surrounded by rolling hills and rows of carefully maintained grapevines. The venue overlooked a quiet lake where the afternoon sunlight reflected gently across the water. Guests had traveled from different states to attend. Nearly 200 people filled the white chairs arranged beneath a decorated wooden arch. Every table displayed fresh flowers, polished silverware, and handwritten place cards. Months of preparation had created what appeared to be the perfect celebration. We arrived several hours before the ceremony. Elira wore a deep emerald dress she had spent weeks choosing, because she wanted something elegant without drawing attention away from the bride. She moved slowly across the stone pathways, holding my arm whenever the ground became uneven. I could tell she was still nervous about her knee, but she smiled every time someone complimented her dress. Rowan greeted us with a warm embrace. "You both made it," he said with genuine relief. "We wouldn't miss this day for anything," Elira answered. For a brief moment, everything felt exactly as I had hoped. Then Seraphine approached. She kissed Rowan on the cheek before turning toward us with a polished smile that photographers immediately surrounded. She hugged Elira lightly, careful not to wrinkle her own wedding gown, then thanked us for coming as though we were ordinary guests instead of her future family. The wording struck me as slightly unusual, but I dismissed the feeling. Weddings were stressful. Perhaps I was reading too much into small details. As the morning continued, I noticed something I couldn't ignore. Every conversation Seraphine had seemed to end with instructions for photographers. She adjusted seating positions, asked guests to stand closer together, requested additional photographs beside the vineyard entrance, and repeatedly asked whether certain backgrounds looked expensive enough. Even the wedding planner appeared exhausted trying to satisfy her constant changes. An hour later, while guests gathered for refreshments before the ceremony, Elira quietly excused herself to rest on a nearby bench overlooking the lake. I offered to stay with her, but she insisted I greet relatives arriving from out of town. "I'll be fine," she assured me with a gentle smile. "Go welcome your cousins before they think we've forgotten them." I laughed and walked toward the parking area. When I returned 15 minutes later, I found Elira sitting alone exactly where I had left her. "What have you been doing?" I asked. "Watching everyone rush around," she replied softly. "It's amazing how much energy weddings require." Before I could answer, Seraphine appeared again, speaking rapidly with the wedding coordinator. Her expression remained pleasant, yet I noticed something different this time. She wasn't looking at people. She was looking at opportunities. Every movement seemed calculated around where cameras were positioned. Every smile lasted only until the photographer lowered the lens. Then another smile appeared for someone else. It was subtle, almost impossible to notice. But once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe I was. Unfortunately, within the next hour, that illusion would disappear forever. The ceremony itself unfolded without a single visible mistake. Rowan stood beneath the flower-covered arch in a tailored charcoal suit, smiling with the kind of excitement only a groom can feel when he believes his future is finally beginning. As I watched him exchange vows with Seraphine, I tried to push my growing uneasiness aside. Whatever strange impressions I had gathered during the morning, this was still my son's wedding day. He deserved parents who celebrated instead of searching for problems that might not even exist. The applause echoed across Silver Lake Estate as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. White flower petals drifted through the air while photographers moved around them like they were covering a royal event. Guests laughed, embraced each other, and congratulated the newlyweds. Alira squeezed my hand gently. "They look happy," she whispered. "I hope they stay that way," I answered. She glanced at me for a second. "You still seem worried." "I'm probably just tired." She smiled. "You've never been able to hide your thoughts from me." She was right. After 37 years together, she could read my face before I even spoke. The reception began shortly afterward on the western lawn overlooking the vineyard. Round tables filled the open space beneath strings of warm lights that would glow once evening arrived. Waiters carried trays of champagne while a quartet played soft instrumental music near the dance floor. It was exactly the kind of elegant celebration Rowan had always imagined. Guests spread throughout the garden, taking photographs beside the lake and chatting beneath carefully arranged flower displays. I walked with several old friends toward the bar while Alira remained near one of the decorative stone paths leading to the family portrait area. Her knee was beginning to bother her again, so she moved carefully, avoiding uneven sections of grass whenever possible. About 20 minutes after the ceremony ended, the wedding coordinator announced that immediate family should gather near the lakeside garden for official photographs. Everyone slowly made their way toward the location. The photographers positioned grandparents in the front row, cousins toward the back, and children near the flower arrangements. Rowan stood proudly beside Seraphine while guests waited for the final adjustments. Alira approached carefully, taking measured steps across the narrow stone pathway. I noticed the ground beside the path looked unusually damp. Rain had fallen the previous evening, and a shallow drainage ditch hidden beneath decorative grass remained filled with soft mud. Most guests avoided it because the area had been marked earlier with small landscape lights. Except, the lights were gone. I frowned. Had someone removed them? Before I could think further, Seraphine suddenly stepped away from Rowan. She walked directly toward Alira with an expression so warm that anyone watching would have assumed she was simply helping her mother-in-law find the correct place for the photograph. She leaned closer and spoke quietly. I couldn't hear a single word. Alira nodded politely. Then everything happened in less than 2 seconds. Seraphine placed one hand against Alira's upper arm. At first the movement looked harmless, almost affectionate. Then the pressure increased. Instead of guiding her forward, she shoved. Alira lost her balance instantly. Her recovering knee twisted awkwardly as she slipped off the edge of the pathway and fell sideways into the muddy drainage ditch. The sound of shocked gasps spread through the crowd. Mud splashed across her emerald dress. One shoe disappeared beneath the thick wet soil. She cried out as she tried to protect her injured leg. For a heartbeat nobody moved. Then several guests rushed forward. I reached her first. "Alira." She looked up at me, breathing heavily. "My knee." I knelt beside her without caring that my own trousers were becoming covered in mud. "Don't try to stand yet." Behind me, whispers filled the garden. What happened? Did she slip? Was the ground unstable? I turned toward Seraphine. She wasn't rushing to help. She wasn't apologizing. Instead, she stood perfectly still with a tight smile frozen on her face while one photographer awkwardly lowered his camera. Then she laughed. Not loudly. Not hysterically. Just enough for people nearby to hear. "Oh no," she said with an amused smile. I guess she lost her footing. A few uncertain guests forced polite laughter because they assumed the bride was trying to reduce the embarrassment. My stomach tightened. This wasn't nervous laughter. It sounded rehearsed. Even worse, Rowan didn't run to his mother. He stepped beside Seraphine, slipped an arm around her waist, and quietly said something that made her smile again. I couldn't hear his words, but I saw his expression. He looked more concerned about calming his bride than checking whether his injured mother was hurt. That moment cut deeper than the fall itself. Together with two relatives, I carefully helped Alira back onto the stone path. She winced as she placed weight on her recovering knee. "I'm all right," she insisted through obvious pain. "No," I answered quietly. "You're not." As wedding staff hurried to bring towels and clean water, I glanced across the garden once more. Seraphine wasn't looking at Alira. She wasn't looking at Rowan either. She was staring directly at every photographer nearby. Then, in a calm voice that carried farther than she probably intended, she said, "Please make sure none of those pictures leave this wedding." The request lasted only a few seconds, but something inside me changed forever. Because people who witness an accident ask whether someone is injured. People who cause one worry about the evidence. After helping Alira into the bridal lounge, I closed the door behind us and finally allowed myself to breathe. A member of the venue staff brought clean towels, a first aid kit, and a bag of ice for her knee. Mud stained nearly every inch of her emerald dress, and despite her efforts to remain composed, I could see the pain in her face each time she shifted her leg. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I stared at her in disbelief. "Why are you apologizing?" "I ruined the photographs." I shook my head immediately. "No, Alira. Someone ruined this day. It wasn't you." She lowered her eyes and remained silent. That silence bothered me more than anything else. For nearly 4 decades, my wife had always spoken honestly, even when the truth was uncomfortable. If she wasn't defending herself now, it wasn't because she believed she was guilty. It was because she didn't want to make our son's wedding even more difficult. The venue's medical coordinator arrived a few minutes later and carefully examined her knee. Fortunately, the joint didn't appear seriously damaged, but he recommended she avoid walking for the rest of the evening until the swelling could be evaluated properly. As he wrapped a compression bandage around her leg, someone knocked gently on the lounge door. One of the photographers stepped inside. He looked nervous. "Mr. Voss," he said quietly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" I followed him into the hallway. He looked over both shoulders before speaking. "The bride asked every photographer to delete any images showing the fall. Did you?" He hesitated. "No." "Why not?" "Because I didn't think it was an accident." Those words landed harder than I expected. He explained that professional photographers constantly observed body language before pressing the shutter. According to him, Seraphine hadn't reacted like someone who had accidentally caused another person to fall. She had looked directly toward the cameras before making contact with Alira, almost as if she wanted to control exactly how the moment appeared. "I've photographed more than 200 weddings," he continued. "People who panic rush toward the injured person. She never did." "What happened after?" "She came straight to us." "What did she say?" He repeated her exact words. "Delete every frame where she is on the ground." Not, "Is she hurt?" Not, "Can someone help her?" Only concern about the photographs. Before I could ask another question, the photographer's assistant hurried toward us. "She's looking for you," the assistant whispered. "The bride." He nodded. The photographer sighed. "I have to go." As he walked away, I noticed something lying on a nearby decorative table. It was a folded seating chart, probably left there by one of the wedding planners. I picked it up absent-mindedly. Then I froze. Across the top, the page read, "Final family reception seating." I searched for our names. My own seat appeared beside Rowan's, but Alira's name had been crossed out with black marker. Below it, another handwritten note read, "Move to table 18. Table 18 wasn't near the family. It was positioned at the far edge of the reception, beside the service entrance used by catering staff. At first I assumed someone had corrected an error, Then I unfolded another copy underneath. Again, Alira's name was crossed out. A third version showed the same change. 3 different drafts. 3 identical alterations. This wasn't a last-minute mistake. Someone had repeatedly removed my wife from the family table. Just then, the wedding coordinator approached carrying a clipboard. When she saw the papers in my hands, her expression immediately changed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Who changed these?" She hesitated. I really shouldn't discuss internal planning. I looked directly into her eyes. My wife was pushed into a muddy ditch less than half an hour ago. Her shoulders slowly relaxed. The seating revisions came from the bride. Why? I wasn't told. Did she explain why Alira had to be moved? The coordinator glanced around to make sure nobody else could hear. She only said that certain guests would make the family photographs look more balanced. I frowned. What does that even mean? I honestly don't know. She lowered her voice even further. There were other changes too. What changes? The bride repeatedly asked us not to introduce your wife during the reception speeches. She wanted to shorten the family acknowledgments. My pulse quickened. Alira wasn't simply being ignored. She was being systematically removed from every important moment of the celebration. Photographs, seating, introductions, recognition. Individually, each decision might have seemed insignificant. Together, they formed a pattern. As I stood there trying to understand why anyone would go to such lengths, I noticed an elderly woman watching me from across the reception hall. She wasn't part of either family. She wasn't dressed like a guest. Yet she looked at the seating chart in my hands as though she had expected me to discover it. A few seconds later, she slowly walked toward me. When she finally stopped in front of me, she extended her hand with complete confidence. "My name is Marcella Wynne," she said. "I believe your daughter-in-law and I have something very important in common." Marcella Wynne looked to be somewhere in her late 70s, but there was nothing fragile about the way she carried herself. She stood straight, spoke with quiet confidence, and watched people with the calm attention of someone who noticed details others ignored. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, and although her clothes were simple, every member of the venue staff greeted her with unmistakable respect as they passed. "I'm afraid we've never met," I said. "We haven't," she replied. "But I know exactly who your daughter-in-law is." Those words immediately caught my attention. She motioned toward a quieter section of the estate near the old wine cellar, away from the music and the conversations filling the reception lawn. "I think you should hear something before the evening goes any further." Normally, I would have refused to leave my wife for even a few minutes after what had happened. Before following Marcella, I returned to the bridal lounge to check on Alira. She was resting with her injured leg elevated while 2 of her closest friends stayed beside her. "I'll only be gone for a few minutes," I told her. She forced a reassuring smile. "I'm fine. Go." I squeezed her hand before quietly closing the door. Outside, Marcella led me along a stone path that curved behind the vineyard toward a smaller building overlooking the lake. Unlike the decorated reception area, this part of Silver Lake Estate was peaceful and almost empty. Only the distant sound of music reached us. Once we were alone, she finally spoke. "I owned this estate for 26 years before selling it to the current management." I looked around in surprise. "So everyone here knows you?" "They do." She folded her hands together. "And that's exactly why I recognized Seraphine the moment she arrived this morning." "You've met her before?" "Unfortunately." Her answer came without hesitation. "It was 6 years ago." She explained that Seraphine had once worked as an intern during the estate's busiest wedding season, while studying luxury event management. According to Marcella, she had impressed almost everyone with her intelligence and professionalism. Almost everyone. "There was always one problem," Marcella continued. "What problem?" "She believed every relationship was a competition." I remained silent as she continued. Whenever another employee received praise, Seraphine quietly spread rumors questioning that person's abilities. If someone earned a promotion, she found ways to damage their reputation without leaving evidence. She rarely argued directly because public confrontations created witnesses. Instead, she preferred carefully planned situations where other people reached false conclusions on their own. Did anyone ever prove it? Marcella nodded slowly. Eventually, she reached into her leather handbag and removed a thin envelope. Inside were several printed emails. These are copies, she explained. I kept the originals after the investigation. I scanned the pages. They showed anonymous complaints sent to management from temporary email accounts. At first glance they appeared unrelated, but each message targeted someone who had recently disagreed with Seraphine. One employee was accused of stealing expensive wine. Another supposedly insulted guests. A third was blamed for damaging decorations. Every accusation turned out to be false. Eventually the digital records connected every anonymous account to the same computer used by Seraphine during her internship. Why wasn't she charged? I asked. There wasn't enough evidence for criminal action. She simply resigned before management completed its report. I slowly lowered the papers. What does any of this have to do with my wife? Marcella looked directly at me. Because today's incident followed exactly the same pattern. She explained that manipulators often didn't attack the strongest person in a group first. Instead, they isolated whoever represented stability. Once that person lost credibility or influence, everyone else became easier to control. Your wife isn't her enemy, Marcella said quietly. Then why target Alira? Because she is the emotional center of your family. Those words echoed inside my mind. Sounded impossible. Yet everything I had witnessed since arriving suddenly fit together. The seating charts. The missing introductions. The demand to erase photographs. The shove. None of it looked random anymore. Before I could ask another question, Marcella reached into her bag once again. This time she removed a small flash drive. I wasn't planning to bring this today, she admitted. But after seeing what happened by the lake, I decided you deserved the truth. What is on it? Copies of surveillance footage from 6 years ago. I frowned. Surveillance footage? It shows Seraphine creating another accident that she later claimed was completely unintentional. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then my phone vibrated. The caller was Rowan. I answered immediately. Dad, where are you? I'm with someone. You need to come back now. His voice sounded strained. Seraphine is saying Mom intentionally tried to ruin the wedding. I felt my jaw tighten. Even after everything she had done, she wasn't defending herself. She was rewriting the story. And this time, she intended to make my injured wife the villain. I ended the call without another word and hurried back toward the reception lawn with Marcella walking beside me. The cheerful music that had filled the estate only minutes earlier now sounded strangely distant. Guests had stopped laughing. Small groups stood together whispering while others glanced toward the center of the reception where Rowan and Seraphine were surrounded by relatives. The atmosphere had changed completely. As soon as I stepped onto the lawn, Seraphine spotted me. There he is, she announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Several conversations immediately stopped. She walked toward me wearing an expression of wounded innocence that would have convinced anyone who hadn't witnessed what happened beside the lake. I'm so glad you're back, she said. We really need to clear up this misunderstanding. I folded my arms. What misunderstanding? She sighed dramatically. I think your wife became upset because she didn't like where the family photographs were being taken. She pulled away while I was trying to help her, and then she slipped. I stared at her without blinking. The lie came so naturally that it almost sounded rehearsed. Before I could answer, Rowan stepped between us. Dad, he said carefully. Seraphine told me Mom became frustrated before everyone gathered for the pictures. I looked directly at my son. Did your mother tell you that? He hesitated. No. Then why would you believe it? His eyes shifted toward Seraphine for only a second before returning to me. I don't know what happened. I wasn't standing close enough. No, I replied quietly. You weren't. A few relatives moved closer, sensing that something serious was unfolding. Seraphine noticed the growing audience and immediately adjusted her tone. I never wanted any conflict, she said, placing a hand against her chest. This is supposed to be our happiest day. Marcella finally stepped forward. No, she said calmly. What you wanted was control. Seraphine's expression froze. I beg your pardon? You heard me. For the first time since I had met Marcella, I saw genuine anger in her eyes. I've watched your methods before. Seraphine laughed nervously. I have absolutely no idea who you are. I owned this estate long before today's management took over. The smile slowly disappeared from Seraphine's face. Recognition flashed across her eyes. Only for a moment, but I saw it. So, Marcella continued, you do remember me. I met hundreds of people while working here years ago. Not hundreds who investigated anonymous complaints connected to your name. Several nearby guests exchanged confused looks. One of Seraphine's bridesmaids frowned. What investigation? Seraphine answered before Marcella could speak. She's confused. I worked here as a student years ago. That's all. Marcella reached into her handbag. No. She removed the same printed emails she had shown me beside the wine cellar. And that's not all. Seraphine's confidence cracked for the first time. Those documents are private. They became evidence after your employer discovered you fabricated accusations against your coworkers. A murmur spread through the gathering. What accusations? Is that true? I don't understand. Seraphine quickly turned toward the crowd. She's trying to ruin my wedding. Then she looked at Rowan. Tell them she's lying. My son remained silent. His hesitation spoke louder than any answer. Marcella handed several copies of the emails to Rowan first. He slowly read each page. His face became increasingly pale. What is this? He whispered. They traced every anonymous account back to the same office computer, Marcella explained. The investigation ended only because she resigned before disciplinary action was completed. Seraphine reached toward the papers. Don't read those. Too late. Rowan had already finished. He looked at his wife with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger. Disappointment. Deep, unmistakable disappointment. You never told me any of this. It wasn't important. It wasn't important? Her voice became sharper. It happened years ago. Did it happen? She didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. Meanwhile, I noticed the estate manager walking toward us carrying a small tablet computer. 2 members of the security staff followed behind him. He stopped beside Marcella. I've located the recordings you requested. Seraphine turned abruptly. What recordings? The manager looked directly at her. The security cameras covering the lakeside garden. Every trace of color disappeared from her face. She took one slow step backward, then another. No, she whispered. The manager continued calmly. The cameras remained active throughout today's ceremony. Guests looked from him to Seraphine and back again. No one spoke. Even the musicians had stopped playing. The estate manager held the tablet in both hands. If everyone wishes, he said, we can determine exactly what happened beside the pathway. For the first time all afternoon, Seraphine abandoned every attempt to appear composed. She rushed toward me, her voice trembling. Mr. Voss, please. I didn't respond. She lowered her voice even further. Please don't let him play it. 20 minutes earlier she had demanded every photograph disappear. Now she was begging me to stop something she knew she couldn't explain away. And in that single desperate moment, I realized one undeniable truth. An innocent person asks for justice. A guilty person asks for silence. The reception lawn became completely silent. Even the wind seemed quieter as every guest turned toward the estate manager holding the tablet. The musicians lowered their instruments without being asked. Waiters stopped walking between tables. Conversations vanished. Nearly 200 people stood frozen, waiting to see whether the bride's version of events or my wife's would survive the next few minutes. Seraphine remained standing in front of me. Her confident smile had disappeared completely. Mr. Voss, she whispered again. Please, don't do this here. I looked at her calmly. You weren't worried about doing something to my wife in front of everyone. Her eyes filled with tears almost instantly. I made a mistake. You haven't admitted any mistake. I panicked. You blamed Alira. I didn't mean it. You told everyone she ruined your wedding. She lowered her head without answering. The estate manager looked at me. Would you like me to continue? I nodded once. Please. He connected the tablet to the large display screen normally used for wedding slideshows. Only minutes earlier it had shown childhood photographs of Rowan and Seraphine. Now the screen turned black before switching to footage from one of the estate's security cameras overlooking the lakeside garden. The timestamp confirmed it had been recorded 20 minutes after the ceremony. Everyone watched. The first angle clearly showed Alira walking carefully along the stone pathway. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't even looking toward Seraphine until the bride approached her. The second camera offered an even clearer view. Seraphine smiled. She glanced toward the photographers. She looked briefly behind her. Then she extended her arm. Instead of guiding Alira around the muddy ground, she deliberately pushed against her shoulder. The movement wasn't violent. Didn't need to be. One controlled shove was enough. Alira lost her balance and disappeared into the drainage ditch exactly as we had all witnessed. Gasps spread through the audience. Several guests covered their mouths. Others turned toward Seraphine in complete disbelief. But the recording wasn't finished. The third camera continued playing. Instead of helping my wife, Seraphine immediately walked toward the photographers. Although the video had no audio, everyone could clearly see her pointing repeatedly toward their cameras while shaking her head, insisting that something be deleted. The estate manager paused the footage. I also have audio recorded from a nearby security microphone. Without waiting for another request, he played it. Seraphine's voice echoed across the speakers. Delete every picture of her on the ground. Nobody needs to see that. Not once did she ask whether Alira was injured. Not once did she call for medical assistance. The truth no longer required interpretation. It was undeniable. The silence that followed lasted several long seconds. Then Rowan slowly stepped forward. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the guests. He looked only at Seraphine. Why? His voice was barely above a whisper. She wiped tears from her face. I only wanted today to be perfect. My mother embarrassed you? No. Then why? She struggled to answer. Finally she spoke the words that destroyed everything she had tried to protect. Your mother always mattered more than I did. No one interrupted. She continued speaking through tears. Every family dinner, every holiday, every decision, everyone asked what Alira thought first. I was always the outsider. I was tired of living in her shadow. I stared at her. So you humiliated her because you wanted attention? I only wanted one day where everyone looked at me. They were already looking at you, I replied quietly. You were the bride. She covered her face with both hands. I don't know why I did it. Marcella answered before anyone else could. Because attention gained through kindness never satisfied you. Rowan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the warmth that had once filled them was gone. He slowly removed his wedding ring. Several guests watched in stunned silence as he placed it carefully on the head table. I married someone I believed I could trust, he said. I don't know the person standing in front of me. Seraphine reached toward him. Please don't leave. He stepped backward. No. Her parents had remained near the edge of the crowd throughout the entire confrontation. At last her father walked forward. He stopped in front of Alira, who had been brought outside in a wheelchair after hearing the commotion. With genuine shame in his eyes, he bowed his head. I cannot undo what happened today, he said quietly. But on behalf of my family, I am deeply sorry. Alira nodded gently. I accept your apology. Without another word, he turned toward his daughter. You made your choices. Then he walked away. His wife followed. Several relatives quietly left behind them. One by one the reception emptied. No shouting. No dramatic arguments. Only silence. Within a month, Rowan filed for an annulment. Every luxury sponsorship Seraphine had arranged was cancelled after the security footage became known. The lifestyle magazine planning to feature the wedding withdrew its article before publication. Companies that had once admired her carefully polished public image no longer wished to associate with someone whose own actions had exposed the truth. As for Alira, her knee required several weeks of additional therapy, but thankfully no permanent damage remained. We spent that winter focusing on healing instead of reliving what happened. The following spring, Rowan visited our home carrying nothing but a small overnight bag and a quiet expression. I'm sorry, he said. I should have believed Mom sooner. Alira stood up, embraced him, and simply answered, You're home. That was enough. Families are not measured by perfect celebrations or beautiful photographs. They are measured by the people who remain when appearances disappear. Looking back, I realized the wedding itself was never the most important event that day. The truth was. And although the truth arrived painfully, it saved the people who still deserve to be called family. Thank you for reading this story. If you enjoyed this journey filled with family drama, unexpected twists, and hard-earned justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next original story. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next one.